presently. Now, members, we now move to further consideration of the Student Loan Scheme Amendment Bill number 2. When we last considered the bill, we had reached Part 3 and Dr Megan Woods has a call. She has about half a minute remaining on Part 3. Questioners at Part 3 stand part. Dr Megan Woods.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Mr Chairman, I want to continue talking about Part 3 of this bill, and in particular to clauses 63 to 66 of this legislation, and that is around the definition of income for student loan repayment purposes that's contained in this bill. And Mr Chairman, this is one of the reasons why Labor is supporting this bill, that we support the fairness that is enshrined in broadening out the definition of what counts as income that can be assessed for the repayment of student loans. Because what this bill does in clauses 63 to 66 in Part 3 of this bill, it makes changes to the definition of adjusted net income for student loan repayment purposes to ensure that a borrower's repayment obligation accurately reflects their ability to repay their loan. Mr Chairman.
Dr Megan Woods.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Amendments make further adjustments to net income to broaden out that definition of income to include any other type of income not currently captured. So what this bill does is it actually tidies up and makes it much more fairer, where you have definitions of income now including business profits and income from trusts. Because Labor certainly supports measures that does move beyond just looking at wages and salaries as income in which student loan repayments should be made. In fact, Labor supports fair approaches to taxation and taxing wealth where it occurs across the board, and an analogy would be our support for a capital gains tax and how this ties into that. So this is a loophole in the scheme that Labor is happy to see close, and I can hear from Mr Sabins calling across the way. He is overjoyed with our support for this bill and for the fact that we are supporting it. And actually broadening out this definition of income will save the Crown approximately 7.5 million over the next 5 years, according to Treasury advice that was given. But, Mr Chairman, what I want to do is juxtapose the fairness that is enshrined in these clauses 63 to 66 and this broadening of the definition of income with some of the fact that this bill doesn't address some of the other unfair decisions that this government has made in relation to the broader area of student support. Because this is a very technical bill that tinkers around the edges, that what it doesn't do is comprehensively review the whole issue of student support and how it is that if we truly really want to be an innovation-led economy that's based on having a very skilled, very educated and very trained workforce, that what we do is we support our people into education, and this bill does nothing to address that. What Labor thinks is that we do actually need to take this broader, more holistic look at things and see how it is we can achieve these aims. Because what this government is committed to is what Stephen Joyce calls the dampening down of demand for education. To Labor, this is absolutely counter for the kind of New Zealand that we want to see. We want to see a New Zealand where our young people are encouraged into this training. Because actually Treasury has estimated that changes made in budgets 2010 and 2011 would result in 25,000 people losing access to student loans. And you know the people that won't go on to study, to train and to get an education, it's people that, those 25,000 people that can't afford to pay their own fees and to support themselves while we're there. We do not see cutting off access to 25,000 people a way to build the kind of New Zealand that we want. But what this government has done is it's made some very, very unfair decisions. It's cut off student allowances for postgraduate students. And this is at a time where we have a whole lot of rhetoric from the government about how we need more people people with higher degrees in this country, but yet we take away the student support. And I just want the government members to reflect on how this compares to the fairness that they're trying to enshrine through clauses 63 to 66 of the current legislation. I want them to pause and think how these two decisions and these two actions fit together. I want them also to dwell on taking away the right of people aged over 55 to take out a student loan. Where is the fairness in that? We don't see there's been fairness. And I'd also like them to pause and reflect that the Minister of Labour ignored advice from the Ministry of Education in passing their youth rates last week that said this will add to the burden that students have to shoulder as they study. Now, when they go out and they're not getting their allowance, they don't have access to loan and reduced access to loan, add insult to injury, these young people, if they're students who are aged 16 to 19 years of age, will be facing youth rates when they go out there. And Mr Chairman, as someone who is taught and tutored in a university, I can tell you, students that spend all their time working and not applying themselves to their studies certainly do not get the most out of their education that they otherwise would. So, Mr Chairman, what is contained in these clauses 63 to 66 is one of the bases of why Labour is willing to support this bill, because there is fairness in there. But in talking about the fairness that is in these clauses of the legislation, Mr Chairman, I'd like members opposite to think about the very unfair.
Dr David Clark.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, I rise to speak to